Right, so let's start with sleep, the big challenge. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how these different personalities sleep. And I'm going to give you a couple of little tidbits of information about what you can do in order to help your little one in terms of their sensory personality. All right, so let's quickly just whip around the circle. So here we've got our settled baby. Our settled baby is typically a very good sleeper. And I told you this earlier, they classically are little ones that can actually sleep through early. They sleep through the dog barking. They typically are very, very good sleepers. Your social butterfly, they can be tricky to get to sleep. And they need really regular sleeps because they tend to become overstimulated because at the pace at which they're engaging, they need some downtime. Your slow to warm up over here, they often take time to wake up from sleeps and they need very specific sleep spaces. Remember, they're slow to warm up. So if something's new, like you go on holiday, sleep becomes a nightmare with them because they don't like things that are new. And when routines are all exactly the same, they're going to end up sleeping best. And then you've got your sensitive baby who tends to have very poor sleep cycles, their sleep patterns. They have short sleep cycles. They're cat nappers. They wake up after 15 minutes. They're very easily woken and they have very short awake times because they become overstimulated because their filters aren't working because they have got these very low filters. So let's have a look at each of these personalities and see what you can do about it. So what's going to happen tonight is you'll be able to switch off for the other three personalities other than what your baby is. Although if I were you, I'd be listening because next time around you could have something different. So let's start with your settled baby. So these babies, as I said, are typically good sleepers. They often do hold on to that day sleep for a very long time in the toddler years. They really love their sleep and they tend to sleep well over midday. They tend to sleep well at night in the toddler years. They're pretty flexible about where and when they sleep. Those are the babies that, and you see the parents who take their babies out to a restaurant at night. The baby kind of sleeps under the restaurant table. They take them home. They sleep just as well at night. If you did that with a social butterfly, they would be all over the place in the restaurant. And if you did that with a slow to warm up, they wouldn't know where they were and they would become very sensitive in that space. And so it's really only your settled babies that you can do that with, and they're flexible with sleep for a very long time, all the way through into the toddler years. So a couple of little tips that I want you to think about with your settled baby. For those of you that have got newborn babies who are settled babies and are sleeping very well, they will need to be woken up at night, in the day, sorry, not at night, in the day in order to feed, because they tend to be the babies that sleep right through feed. So instead of waking every 3 hours for a day feed, they might sleep for like 5 or 6 hours, and it ends up causing day-night sleep reversals. So for the newborn day feeds, try and feed them on cue or on according to a routine, and make sure they're awake after 3 hours so that you get them feeding by 4 hours if they're really stretching those day milk feeds. Now, in terms of nighttime, these babies tend to sleep through early, and sometimes as early as 6 weeks old, these babies are actually sleeping through the night. And it causes moms and dads a lot of consternation because you think, are they getting enough in the day that they can actually sleep through at night? My belief on babies who are sleeping at night is do not disturb them. Don't go and disrupt them unless you've been told to. And you'll be told to if your baby was prem and not gaining weight or was born small for dates. In other words, they were very small at birth. And those two scenarios of babies, you might be told to wake your baby at night. But other than them, I don't think you should be waking babies at night. And remember with these little ones, if they're very stimulated, they might switch to a social butterfly. So if they've had a very stimulating late afternoon or dad's come home and really stimulated them, they might then become much more like a social butterfly and much more difficult to get to sleep. And my final tip when it comes to your settled baby is don't boast about it, because nobody wants to know that your baby is sleeping through the night at 6 weeks old when their baby is waking up 10 times at night. So that's your settled baby. Moving on to your social butterfly. So remember, your social butterfly is wired by interesting things, and that means that their sleep can be easily disrupted. Why? Because sleep is boring, and so they fight going to sleep. They much prefer social interactions. They do tend to settle into good sleep habits in the toddler years as long as you stick to the rules. And the rules are make sure these little ones have got routines and that you keep everything the same. And one of the biggest tips I can give you, and I'm not going to run through all the tips here below, they're all going to be in the booklet that you're going to get tomorrow. But one of the most important things is that you must make sure that your social butterfly thinks that the world ends at 6 p.m. So how do you do that? You make sure, so let's say your bedtime is 7 p.m. or 6:30. 1 hour before bedtime, you're going to take your little one to the bathroom to go and have a quiet bath. And after bath time, after your bath time period, you're going to take them into their room and do a bedtime routine, which includes a massage and reading a book and having a feed and putting down and you're never going to leave the room. And this is very important. If you have got a social butterfly and having sleep problems, this is the one tip you need tonight. Do not take your social butterfly out of their bedroom after bath time. And the reason for that is that you can trick a social butterfly into thinking that the whole world ends after bath time. And if they think the whole world ends, they're not going to try and fight to get out because they don't think that anything else is happening outside of the room. But if a social butterfly knows that there's a party happening in the TV room when they're going to bed, you have lost the plot completely because you're never ever going to get them to stay in their room as toddlers. So from like 4 months onwards, with your social butterfly, you have a bath time routine, bedtime, and you don't leave the room. Very important. Make sure that they have 15 minutes of calm just before sleep time. And many of you will say, yeah, you take them to the room, but they immediately start to niggle. And that's because something in the social butterfly's brain says to them, she's about to take away my addiction. She's about to take away the thing that's wiring my brain. And she's about to make it really calm, and I'm going to fight it. So they often start to fight bedtime just before you put them down. Another very important thing with them, don't do any TV after 4 p.m. TV is terrible anyway for sleep, but it's even worse for these babies. It disrupts the melatonin release that is part of the brain, that's in the brain that cues sleep, and it happens in the absence of light. So you don't want blue light coming from the TV at all with these social butterflies, please. And then you want to do lots and lots of moving activities in the late afternoon. So I've written here trampoline. You can also talk about swinging in the very last point, 15 minutes of swinging. Lots of physical and movement activities in the late afternoon. And that's before bedtime, before supper. And that's because we have a little velocity storage mechanism in the brain, which allows us to kind of ramp up the amount of movement that we've had or trap the amount of movement we've had in the day. And it helps us to sleep better at night. So for those of you who've been on a very big hike or have done a massive marathon or a mountain bike race or whatever you've been doing, all that physical activity, you will know that you sleep much better those nights than the days that you've been sedentary. And the reason is that proprioception and vestibular information, both of which are sensory information that comes from activity, helps our brain to sleep better at night, but especially for the social butterfly. Right, moving on to our slow to warm up bubbas. So our slow to warm up bubbas can be good sleepers, okay, but it has to be with a good routine and when the environment is consistent. It's very important. Remember that these are the babies, because they've got a very low filter, they notice any change. So when they feel like maybe something's new in the environment, like they've got a label in the back of their clothes, or a routine has changed, or they're sleeping in a different space, like under a table in a restaurant, or in a camp cot at the hotel, they really feel that difference, and it really, really disrupts their sleep. So try and keep their routine and the environment very, very consistent, because they actually can be really good sleepers, but they need that consistent environment and routine. Remember that new situations and new changes are going to throw their sleep out. And I've had many patients who've come into my practice and said to me after a holiday, I say, how was your holiday? They went, that was just the most pointless effort. None of us rested, because my slow to warm up baby noticed everything that was new in the environment and wouldn't sleep for the whole 5 days. And then just when they get home, they've started to learn to sleep again. And then of course they're home and there's another change. So new situations do really throw out their sleep. So that means that if you're going on holiday and you need to prepare a space because you know that the sleep environment is going to be different, start to prep it ahead of time. So one of the things that I like to encourage parents to do is to set up a camp cot. Like if you're going to take a camp cot away with you, set one up in the bedroom before you go away so that your little one gets used to just one change, which is a new camp cot. Everything else stays the same. The bedroom's the same, the routine's the same, the doo-doo blankie's the same, the curtains are the same, but the camp cot's different, and let them get used to that. And then take that camp cot with the doo-doo blankie and everything that supports your baby's sleep, take that on holiday with you. You're much more likely to get a better night's sleep when you're awake. These slow to warm up babies tend to also take a bit of time to wake up. And my third was a slow to warm up. And often she would need to actually just have some time to defrag after she'd kind of woken up, to wake up on her own, because she was quite grumpy just after she woke up, because it was an adjustment in terms of her brain taking in processing. Or taking in sensory information. These little ones, as I've said, fight sleep if anything is new and novel. They also have very important reliance on a sleep association object. So when we talk about a sleep association object, we're talking about a doo-doo blankie or a dummy or a little soft toy that they can hold onto. And these doo-doo blankies, dummies, and sleep association objects are very important because they really do decrease the amount of separation anxiety that your slow to warm up little one will have. And these little ones tend to have worse separation anxiety, both at about 4 or 5 months, and then again at about 7 to 10 months. So they have this disruption because they notice the difference. So when you walk out the room, they keep calling you back. And that's quite classic with your slow to warm up. But if they've got this separation object, in other words, something that they can hold on to, and they know that they associate with it or associate with sleep, they then will be better sleepers. Another one with these little ones is that their habits become very quickly entrenched. So you need to make sure that whatever habits you're putting in place with your slow to warm up are habits that you want in terms of the long term. So if you're feeding to sleep, you're going to battle to change that habit, because remember, these little ones hold on to things. They don't like adjustments. All right. Then in terms of sleep and your sensitive babies, and I know we don't have many sensitives in the audience today, but we certainly will in the people who are going to actually be able to watch this. We're going to divide this into little clips just on sleep and feeds and play and so on. So if you've got a sensitive baby, they can be very, very tricky sleepers. Now, I do a sleep online course in which we get babies to sleep through the night. My next one's actually starting on the 27th of September, and you can join that. But whenever we have that, and I've got a mom who's got a cat napper, and when I'm talking about a cat napper, I'm talking about a baby who only sleeps for 15 minutes day or night. So after 15 minutes, they wake up. You can set your clock by it. They very typically are sensitive babies, because what happens when you're sensitive is that everything that's going on in your environment is something that can disrupt you. So for instance, you can be disrupted by a sound 5 houses away, a label on the back of your baby grow, a little piece of sand that got into the bottom of the baby grow from the tumble dryer. So any of these things can actually disrupt your little one's sleep, and it's very hard to know what it is, but often it disrupts them at the end of that first 15 minutes of sleep. So how to solve this? First of all, watch these little ones' awake times, and you'll all know from using the app that on the widget we talk about the awake times. So for newborn babies, it's only 45 minutes to an hour. For older babies, it's up to 3 hours. But watch those awake times, because these little ones need a sleep at the end of those awake times, because when they have their sleeps, they defrag and they reset their sensory load. But when they are not having sleeps, they do become overstimulated. They need regular sleeps. And for those of you who've got sensitive toddlers, you must have that midday sleep. And I personally am a fan of having a rest time at least, but preferably a sleep as well, all the way through until 5 years old. With these little ones, if there's any illness or reflux or any disruption of gas bubbles in their tummy, they're likely to wake up more at night, because they're very sensitive to interoception.